Hi everyone, hope you're doing well and enjoying the show. My name is Jeff Gordon. I am the Director of Marketing for eMedia. eMedia is a B2B lead generation company. We help clients promote their content in our email bulletins, and we drive leads. So coincidentally or not, the topic today is about content, and really about how content can improve and accelerate your online B2B advertising. So setting the stage in terms of what we hope to cover. The first is why content. I'm sure the content marketing trend hasn't passed you by. So we did some interesting research that I'll share with you, as well as some other research that really content is where it's at right now. Then we'll talk about really how to create an effective content strategy. If you're already doing it, hopefully these are some good tips to maybe tweak your process. And if you haven't gotten into content marketing yet, this would be a great way to start. We'll talk about what content works. We have 7 do's and don'ts, really great tips to figure out how to assess your content and see if it's working for you and for your goals. And then lastly, figure out really what type of content assets work best. There's pros and cons to everything, just like in life, and there's tons of different types of content assets. So we'll go through some of the major ones, and you can see really some of the pros and some of the cons. So starting out, we're obviously at a marketing advertising show. We're all marketers here, or most of us. So the question is why do we advertise? And I think there are a lot of reasons. We do so to market, we do it to create a brand, to build awareness, to drive social likes and fans. But I think ultimately we do it for the love of leads, especially in the B2B space. And more often than not, advertising, we're doing it for lead gen. We're trying to drive those leads and grow our business. But it's not that easy. If you think about it, nobody's going to click on an ad that says sell to me, right? If they did, I wouldn't need to be here. None of us would need to be here. But it's not that easy, so we have to get creative. In our online advertising, we're promoting a special offer, a free trial, sales, our content, whatever it is. Our goal is to really entice that first click, to begin them on that journey. But the journey doesn't start if you don't get that click. And so it's not that hard, so we have to be creative. But assume we do get that click and they land on this landing page. You know, we're all tempted to just slap this huge lead capture form on it, thinking someone's going to fill out 10 fields and give us their information. And that's just not the way it works. So we have to, again, get creative and figure out how can we offer value to really drive that engagement. And so that's where content comes into play. So if you think about it, content is really the carrot in online advertising, especially in B2B, if our goal is to generate leads. And if you think about lead generation holistically, it's very much give and take. We as marketers, we want to know a lot more about that prospect. And yes, with marketing automation and analytics and tracking, we know a lot about these people already. But that doesn't beat somebody raising their hand and saying, I want to learn more, when they do that by filling out your form. That, I think, is our ultimate goal. But the buyers, the prospects themselves, if you think about this give and take analogy, they want something too. They're not just going to click on your ad, land on your page, fill out your form, and off we go. They want something too, whether it's pricing, whether it's a demo, whether it's your latest survey or white paper, whatever that is, they want something of value. So we need to offer it to them. And that's where content marketing comes into play. So we give it to them. So the question is why content? And there's really 5 main functions in our eyes that content plays into B2B lead gen. First and foremost is to educate and inform the audience. The B2B buying process, especially the B2B buyer, has really changed. It's no longer so much sales driven. It's very much driven by marketers, but also in many cases by the buyer themselves. With the internet and all the information and research that they have at their disposal, they're controlling much more of that process than before. So if we can get in front of them with content early on, educate and inform them, that's a real goal for us. Content also helps in a lot of other ways. It can improve capability and status in your field. If you don't have a huge brand, it's a great way to get a seat at the table. You can show up with your content at the right time in the right place, and you can compete with the big brands out there if they enjoy your ideas and you're really offering something of value. As marketers, we're really trying to fix problems. That's our goal with whatever the product or service that we sell. So content's a great way to demonstrate that without somebody talking to somebody on sales. We can differentiate from competitors. And then broadly speaking with content, it's a really great way to show your personality in your company, your thoughts and your opinions, and create confidence in your solution. Content's a long format to really understand who people can understand who you are. It's hard to see that in a banner ad or an ad on Google or the like. This is really our opportunity for our personalities to shine. So just setting the stage here in terms of where we are in content marketing, it's obviously very popular. Last year, at the end of last year, we commissioned NSM Research to talk to about 200 different UK-based marketers. We asked them about their lead generation efforts, their content lead gen, what they're doing currently, and what they're going to do in the future. And we found some interesting things. I think, interestingly for us, advertising behind email was the second most effective channel for lead gen, which is good news. Advertising is a critical component to really beginning that process of generating leads. But what we found really when the survey is this misalignment or disconnect in terms of people using content but having a clear strategy. Only about a quarter of them said they knew what they were doing in terms of content. There seems to be really little alignment and cohesion amongst the assets that they're using for content and the goals of the lead generation campaign. So while it's great to see that more and more people are using content, there's a little bit of a disconnect there, and hopefully we can dive into some of that right now. One particular takeaway from the survey, we asked these marketers, what types of content will you be producing for 2013? And you can see at the top, the two main components are product specs, demos, case studies, digital magazines, and ebooks. Those are all really expensive to produce and timely. And we found at eMedia that in most cases, those aren't the ideal content assets to really drive leads, which is our goal here. So again, this theme that we keep talking about of a disconnect, it's great that content marketing is becoming foremost, but we have to figure out the best way to harness that. But we know it's a priority. That's why we're all here. Half the people that we surveyed said content marketing and content lead gen was their main focus for this year. If you don't believe me, if you don't believe eMedia, which is fine, eConsultancy also did a recent survey with Adobe. About 40% of the marketers they surveyed said content was their #1 priority for this year. So we know we're in the right place. And so now we figure out, okay, let's do some content marketing. How do we develop that strategy? To figure out how to do that, it's best to really look at the classic buying cycle here. And we should all be familiar with this. Really, at the beginning of it, you have realization and awareness all the way down through decision and purchase. And you want to really take a step back when you're thinking about your content marketing strategy and understand where people at each of these different aspects of the buying cycle are. Because there's different types of content that perform best at these different cycles. For instance, if you're if you're trying to promote to IT managers and they're near the decision aspect, they're not going to be interested in your infographics or your white papers. They're much farther down along the path. They're going to want things much more to do with the purchase, price guide, comparisons with competitors, features. And by the same token, somebody in the early stage, in the realization or awareness, they're not going to want that type of material. They're in the research phase where impressions are being created. That's when your webinars, your white papers, your infographics, the real sort of high-level trend-based information does really well. The first step is take a look at this buying cycle, figure out what types of assets do you think fit into those different roles as people proceed down that cycle. What we found, and again with this same cycle, that really content lead gen and content marketing, really the sweet spot is at the beginning. Realization, awareness, and maybe a little bit in consideration. And that makes sense if you think about it. These are people, again, doing research. They haven't made decisions. They're probably starting to shortlist some vendors. It's a great way to get in there. And the goal here is to secure credibility and acceptance. And the great way to do that is with content. For a couple of reasons. You can sell the problem or create the opportunity. That's what we're trying to do here is solve problems. It proves you know what you're talking about. Again, it's hard to show that with your banner ads or sometimes with your websites. Your content's a great way to get your opinions out and prove it to the customer. It shows you can fix problems, displays that you're credible, and demonstrates that you're easy to deal with. This is a sort of an underplayed aspect here, but your content, again, your personality, your tone, whatever it is for your brand or for your company, can really shine through in content. And that's important with people who are just starting to get to know you. When they're at this early stage of the sales cycle, they may not know you, and they want to get to know you, so content is a way to do that. We're still dealing with the sales cycle here, but just in the funnel format. And this is really what we found at eMedia to be the types of assets that fit into the various stages of the funnel. At the top, in the research, you see more of the high-level sort of research-based activities, infographics, articles, market guides, white papers, and webinars. Those types of things really fit in, again, as we've been saying, early stage lead generation. People who are still making those impressions, doing their research, and really want to absorb that type of material. As you get towards the decision and ultimately the purchase, case studies, testimonials, product comparisons, those type things, very much towards the end of the sale, that's where those content pieces really fit in. So as long as you think about that funnel and sort of apply the different types of content that'll work in those areas based on our experience, I think you'll see some success. So we've talked about this lead generation journey from B2B advertising, the advertisement, to generating that click, to the landing page, to that form. And we're offering that content to capture that lead. If you're evaluating the actual content, the written words, the graphics, whatever you're doing, we generate about 500,000 leads a year at eMedia with content, other people's content. And so whenever a piece of content crosses our desks, we sort of step back and run it through this 7-step checklist. And if you think about it, this isn't rocket science here, but it's easy to miss a lot of these points if you evaluate your own content. If I were honest with myself and the work that we do, we may miss some of these if we're doing our own internal eMedia content. So our 7 golden rules. First is keep it short. We are all starved for time. That's not a surprise. And so even though white papers, for instance, can be a longer format and they work well, make it manageable. Break up your sections, just like you're writing a paper, have headlines, subheadings, table of contents, whatever you can do to make it more manageable would be great. Keep it fresh. If you've ever gotten or seen a white paper that says copyright 2001 or references data from 5 years ago, it doesn't really show that you're on top of your game. So you want to make sure your data, your opinions, whatever you're producing is relevant and current in today's market. Third is keep it accessible. We're not writing this content for our managers, for our teams internally, that we can often fall into that trap. We're writing this content for people who might buy our product or service. They're not going to know our jargon. They're not going to be industry experts. Our goal is to try to educate them. But if you read it under that lens, you'll probably catch a lot of internal corporate speak that really is going to turn people off. So make sure you want to keep it simple and keep it so people can understand as they're doing their research. Fourth is an interesting point, this idea of mixing it up. There's a lot of different types of content out there, and we'll go through some of that in the future. But everyone likes to read different things. Some people like webinars, some people like to read a white paper, some people just like a quick guide or an infographic. You want to have, as much as you can, a diversity of content, mix it up. For instance, if you want to start a content marketing strategy, you survey your customer base, that data that you get, you can turn that into a white paper. Some of the data could be a quick infographic, and you can even do a webinar from that. We did that at eMedia before and our other sister companies, basically just taking some data and spinning that into 3 or 4 different types of content assets. Everyone's different, so try to mix it up. We go back to this analogy of writing a paper at school, if we can remember that far back. Highlight the benefits. Why are somebody reading this? That's what we're trying to do. We're marketers here. We're doing marketing collateral and content here, but we want people to understand what we're trying to sell and what's our main point. So we dive into number 6 is really tell a story. What's the point of the content? If you read that piece of content and you say to yourself, I don't want to read this, or I'm bored, or I don't know what's going on here, chances are the prospect is going to say the same thing. So make sure that you're telling that story, you're highlighting the benefits, and that it's really targeted for the target you're trying to go after. And lastly, and this is probably the easiest thing, your piece of content, whatever it is, if you're evaluating it, it may not be the best. But with a killer headline and a great abstract, as you go to promote that, you can really drive leads that way. It's all about how you sell it. Just like you're writing a headline for a newspaper or a magazine, you really want to sell that piece of content. So a killer headline can really help drive leads if you're looking to do that. So these 7 golden rules here, if you think about your content and you step back and do an evaluation, you hit these, you'll be in good shape. On the flip side, there are 7 things that are surefire pitfalls of doing. And again, content crossing our desks or potentially yours, if you run through these 7 tips, I think you'll be in good shape if you can eliminate it. The first, and we should all know this, but really content marketing is not about a sales-led conversation. Sales, down the cycle, down that buying cycle, when it comes to the consideration and the decision, that's when the sales speak and the marketing collateral as we know it really comes into play. Earlier on, people want research. They don't want our sales pitch. So make sure that your content is really trying to be helpful and not trying to be overtly salesy. Secondly, data-heavy insights. If you have a data-heavy product, this may not apply, but data can be great. It just can be very, very cumbersome to guide through, especially if people don't know a lot about who you are or the product or service that you're selling. It's important for them to be able to feel welcome, that they can understand what's going on. So infographics, for instance, have become a great way to visually represent data that used to be, you'd have to trudge through a 10-page white paper that was overly technical. So where you can, make things simple, but don't shy away from data. Data is important, and if it's important in your business, continue to use it. Third is dishonesty. I don't think I really need to cover this, but when you're writing your content, you're selling your product or service, you're positioning your brand and what you can offer. You don't want to over-exaggerate or say something that's not true. People are making decisions here, but they'll learn soon enough whether or not you're telling the truth or not. The fourth tip is, or the pitfall of doom, is inconsistency. Buyers are often consuming lots of different pieces of content, and hopefully from you. If they like a white paper they read from you, they may visit a webinar, they may download a buyer's guide, listen to a recording, whatever the content may be. You want to make sure that your message, whatever you're trying to convey, is consistent across those different content mediums. You don't want somebody to see an infographic and then decide they like what they're seeing. They read a white paper on your site and it totally contradicts that. That wouldn't be ideal. So make sure you want a diversity of content, but make sure your message is on point throughout. Just like you wouldn't want to promote anything that's really dull and unengaging, same thing with content. It needs to look good. Get creative. Hey, you dress it up. Infographics is an example of making data much prettier and easy to digest. But even with white papers or webinars, whatever you're doing, the design should be compelling. I'll skip ahead to 7. We all judge books by covers. We're all going to judge a white paper by its cover. Whatever it is you're doing, it needs to be compelling. It needs to look good. You don't have to spend a fortune, but this is also how you're starting the marketing process. So you want people to be interested in what you have to say, and that starts with making it look good. And I'll jump back to number 6 here, this idea of a lack of targeting. Again, it goes back to, you want to make sure you know who you're talking to. You're not writing for internal folks, you're trying to target your ideal prospect. But if your goal is to talk to CFOs, but you're writing white papers using a lot of IT language, there's that disconnect again. So make sure whoever you're talking to, and you could be talking to anyone, that they know that you're talking to them. They feel at home, it feels right to them. So those are our 7 pitfalls of doom with our 7 tips. You hit these 14, and a lot of them are pretty obvious, but it's easy to step back and say, I missed some of those. You hit these points, your content will be in good shape. And so at the beginning I talked about there's tons of different types of content assets. We won't go into all of them, but there's definitely pros and cons to each. So you want to figure out, if you haven't done content marketing to drive leads before, what works for you, and it's going to vary. At eMedia, we found that white papers and guides and infographics tend to do best in terms of content that drives leads. But there are pros and cons to both. So for white papers, they become a trusted source of information. Started in the IT space, now they're much more prevalent across different verticals and industries. They're really a great detailed source of information that people are comfortable with the format. So those are the pros. On the con side, they can be long, they can be heavy, can take a lot of time to read, which is fine. People can understand that. And oftentimes, you can get people who are just looking for information down on the white paper and may not be interested. So you want to understand the pros and cons for each of these. But I would advise you definitely try it and see for yourself. White paper is by far the most common. Next are these guides, tip tops, and growingly infographics. They're great because they're quick, they're easy to share. We're all time starved, so it's a great way to quickly get the information that we want. The good news is those can drive a lot of volume of leads. If you're looking for leads, these are great assets to do so. On the con side, infographics, these type of things tend to have a short shelf life. An infographic, if it's based on data that you did from a survey, probably has a couple months where it doesn't, after that, it's not that relevant. And then you can wonder about the quality of those leads. Somebody committing to read a webinar or a white paper is probably fairly interested in what you have to say. It's much easier to dive through a one-page infographic. So you want to figure out that never-ending balance of quality versus quantity. In the U.S., interestingly, eMedia has offices and does lead gen in the U.S. as well. We found that brochures and webinars, much more so than in the U.K., are also pretty successful for those types of businesses. You get really high-quality leads from webinars, and that's not really surprising. It's a fairly lengthy commitment, whether it's a half hour, an hour, or even if somebody's listening to the recorded version, they're making that commitment. So you're not going to get a lot of leads from this, but these are going to be high-quality leads. So that's really the pro and con there for both. So these are just a handful of the types of assets that we found working with hundreds of B2B clients. that generally work really well for lead gen. But I would encourage you to test each on your own to see what works for you. And so we've come on this journey from why content, going through some stats of how popular content marketing has become, and just how important it is for businesses. The B2B marketer is changing. It's not sales led anymore. It's really led by the prospect. So content marketing is where we need to be. But there's a lot of pushback, and I've been guilty of saying these sort of objections before. They're not new. I don't have time. I don't have the resources. My website already has enough content. I'm done. Please. But there's really, you can overcome all of them, and we've done it, and I think you guys can too if you're struggling with this issue. If you don't have time, just make a little bit of time. You don't have to write 15 white papers or do 10 webinars. That takes a lot of time. But if you're not doing content marketing, try a little bit first. Carve out a little bit of time, even if it's your own. I think you'll find it worth it. You don't have the resources. Again, we all struggle with this. Budgets, marketing budgets are shrinking. We're always shifting things around. Again, I would say if you're not doing content marketing, we know this is where the buyer is going. We all need to be there. So if you're not there, you don't have the resources, just like you carve out a little bit of time, carve out a little bit of resource. And I've done stuff at my own company where we've written the white paper. I've done it myself. You just kind of get down and dirty and do it. And then from there you can prove success, and then you'll have a lot more budget where that comes from. Freelancers also, if you don't have the internal team or can't work with an agency, freelancers are a great way to really start into content marketing. They're familiar with this, relatively inexpensive. But the quality of their work can be quite high. So that would be something that we could recommend. And then lastly, if you already have a lot of great content on your website, that's great. The question is, what are you doing to promote that? And we know from those seven do's and don'ts, if you're not promoting your content and you're not updating your content, having it sit on your website doesn't mean that you can just set it and forget it. Unfortunately, with content, you don't just check that box and it's done for life. It's an evolving process, and there's always something new that we can talk about and new formats we can deliver it to potential prospects. So these are easy objections. I totally empathize, but I think if you carve out a little bit of your time, you'll see some real upside with content marketing. So if you are willing to make the commitment to really try this, or if you're already doing it, which is great, maybe some ideas here about how you can tweak your process. And again, this isn't rocket science. This is pretty basic, but it really gets you in the framework to do well with this. So first is you need a list of ideas and topics that you want to cover. What can you uniquely talk about that's unique to your business or to your offering? Talk to other people in your company. Talk to marketers, talk to your sales folks, but don't just talk to them. Talk to your customers too. They're going to tell you how they found you, what they were looking for. That'll be a great source of information to publish some content. You have a list of content. It doesn't mean you're going to have to do it all at once. Pick one or two that you want to start with and really go from there. Second step would be create a structured wireframe, just like an outline if you're writing a paper. This is really probably the hardest part. It's just like writing a paper for school. For me, coming up with that thesis, the supporting paragraphs and the information. But once you have that, whatever it is for your topic, it makes the writing process so much easier. Then so you have your outline, you have your ideas, your outline, you want to find someone to do it. If you're not doing it internally, hire that trusted somebody outside, or whoever it is. Ideally, you work with the same people over and over again, because you get into a nice rhythm, you understand your tone, and they know what type of content you want to produce. So that's ideal. Fourth in this sort of journey here is, again, be creative with how you present things. Going back to the 7 do's and don'ts, people are judging your content. They're not going to read your white paper or download your blog post or whatever it is if the title is boring, the subject matter is irrelevant, or it doesn't look good. So you really want to dress this up. We're marketers. We know how to do this. This is really in our sweet spot, maybe much more so in our sweet spot than content marketing. But you marry the two, great content and great looks, I think you'll see some nice results. And then lastly, content's an evolving process. It's an evolving space. It's only been a few years now where it's sort of this ubiquitous type of marketing. I think it's only growing, but this isn't set it and forget it. We want to do this content processes and make sure we're amending and sharing and tweaking things as we go along. It's very much a test, and then test again process. So I encourage you to start very small, see some initial traction, and then you can expand from there, because it's really where the wave of the future is going. So we covered a lot. Just quickly in summary, I think the good news is advertising, while we're all here, is still a really important channel. And just behind email, advertising is critical for lead gen. But in order to really expand our lead gen, the buyer is smarter now. They're not just going to fill out our forms. They know how things work. They need to be enticed. So the way to entice them is with great content marketing, and that's what we're doing with content lead gen. If you're talking specifically about your content assets, make sure the titles are relevant, that they're really snazzy, and you're trying to sell the content that's there. Think back to that marketing and the buying cycle that we looked at. Make sure that you're thinking where people are in the buying cycle and match the assets with people in that cycle. The beginning folks who are doing research, they want the higher level, research-heavy types of content. Those folks towards the end, they're ready to talk to sales, pricing, features, competitive matrices, and the like. Always keep your prospect in mind. It's very easy to start thinking this is just content you're writing internally that we'd all understand. Make sure you're writing with the prospect in mind. That's going to help you a lot. Don't be salesy. I don't think there's any more to say about that. This is about helping people so far and getting them comfortable. The sales pitch, while still relevant, is much later down the funnel. And then lastly, just this understanding that different assets, and we went through that list of the funnel and all the different types of assets, they produce different types of leads. So you need to figure out what works well for you and try it. A white paper may work great for some, it may work horribly for others, but an infographic may be what your customers are looking for. Again, you're not going to know until you try. So our encouragement for you is to give it a try and see what content marketing can do for you. So that is us. I won't violate the 7 pitfalls of doom by being overly salesy. At eMedia, we do B2B content lead gen. We have a stand out front. If you want to learn more about what we do, if you're interested in that research about what we do with those B2B marketers and content, we have copies of that available for you. And if you want to continue the discussions at the stand, more than welcome to do that. So I can take Q&A now if people have questions.